All right. Hi, Finance and Coffee, and welcome to the very first live broadcast for 2022. Apologies, I've been a little bit slack because, I don't really work until Australian Day weekend. So, Australian Day long weekend or week has passed, and then sort of like the real, I suppose, real work year finally starts. On the show today, we've got Julian Wills, resident compliance guy for Finance and Coffee, joining us today as well. Jules, how are you, mate?
My man, I'm good. I'm back in Melbourne, back on planes, having a ball.
Yeah, I see you back, and you brought the cold brew with you, mate. And
I did.
that's not ideal for me because I'm Asian and it's not nice to be cold, but that's okay. And
Well,
I
we've
noticed
had
that.
a rainy summer in Sydney, right? And I saw the good weather in Melbourne last week. I thought, man, I'm out and I'm going to Melbourne. I got to Melbourne, it started to rain.
That's awesome. And I noticed that you had to go and borrow someone's office to do this. So shout out to Premium Capital for letting Jules pop in and borrow your office with stable internet because Jules couldn't do the interview with me while he's sitting in a cafe because Finshaw's not paying his mobile bill properly and he's ran out of data.
No, you know what happens, man? I start to do these presentations in a cafe, and you get people turning around because I'm wearing a t-shirt today. People turn around and look at me like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" That sounds complicated.
Yeah, it does, but it's all good. But anyway, mate, I thought I'm going to try to start a new segment in a sense where this is not a Friday wrap. This is more things that I'm going to start calling out stuff that feels a little bit weird, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
So you can sort of see from the banner ads, so the banner downstairs, I'm going to talk about two things, which pops up quite regularly in the group, right? So I think the first one is everybody's love, is about the SLA issues, delays in broker introduced applications. I say that today for you guys joining in this video at the moment. You can check out the SLA traffic light that's in the featured section. So just check it out right now, just before you do decide to support a particular lender or not. Obviously, check with the lender to make sure that that is correct. I've been told before that obviously we've put a SLA for a lender at X date, but it's apparently sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. So it is a best guess only. Definitely check with the lenders before you submit. But I think what I'm going to talk to you about, Jules, is a big gripe, mate. We're in 2022. We're in I would say, the third year of the pandemic. Technology technically has increased 10, 20-fold.
Exponentially, right?
Yeah, since I started, in the third party in 2006. And yet, we've got lenders at 10 plus days to pick up a file. I just don't get it.
Well, the 10 plus and so just for a bit of background, this is a subject obviously that we've all been paying close attention to, particularly throughout the end of last year, where you saw some lenders sort of upwards of 45 days to pick up a deal. And this specifically comes as a result of campaigns that they've run that to entice customers to come to their brand. And they're just not dealing adequately with the campaign that they've run. So what I want to do is I want to look at a couple of things. Now, I'm not going to call out any of the lenders specifically, and I'm not going to call out anybody specifically. What I want to do is I want to talk to the general process. What are the obligations? What are the obligations of the broker under best interest duty, for example? What are the obligations of the lender? And then what are the knock-on effects of that as we wash it up? And you look at the product intervention powers. Well, I mean, last year towards and running into October was sort of the enhancement of product intervention powers. So the PIP with ASIC and the implementation of DDO and all of these things, and breach reporting and reference checking and things of the like. But we're now circling straight back into the stuff that's been there for years, And I think as an industry, we've probably haven't done enough. And now I'm speaking not directly as sort of to the individual broker, but as aggregators and industry associations, there's more that we could have done. And I think now is the time, moving fresh into 2022, we've seen the enhancement of oversight for brokers, but we haven't really seen that cooperation from the entire industry and network as it stands, in that sort of multiplicity of ways that things are assessed. So looking at it straight away. So my interpretation of this, and I'm in the process of writing a consultation paper for both industry associations and for ASIC, just with regard to the way that I see this, and what I see to be some extraordinarily complex issues that don't need to be so complex. This shit should be simple, right? So what I want to talk to first is what? Dan, you're on mute, mate.
I said you said a bad word, but that's okay.
You really pulled me up midstream to say you said a bad word.
I digress. But I do notice that, just before you go ahead, I did notice on the comment section, and I just thought I'd just cover up quickly as well. Obviously, branch land is always and will always be faster than broker land, because you got some branch lenders that have a DLA, right? They can sign off on a deal below particular loan size, right? I'm not gonna go on because it's ad nauseum, because we this has been going on for years and it's not going to change, right? So I'm
not going to talk to the channel conflict. This is not the forum to talk to channel conflict. That's a much, much higher conversation, right? And I'm not going to talk about what I perceive to be anti-competitive, where you've got the same outcome via two different channels, or different outcomes via two different channels for the same thing. Right? We're not going to talk about that today. What we will talk about specifically is what are our obligations as a broker group or as an aggregator group, as acting as an intermediary, and what are the obligations of the lenders. I think that's where the conversation. This is where we can embed the framework for a healthy conversation that actually can achieve some decent results. So as we go through it. Section 47 of the NCCP are the general conduct obligations for an Australian credit licensee. Now, this includes all of the banks. While they have multiple licenses and authorizations under AFSL and so forth and so on, they do hold an Australian credit license to engage in the provision of credit. And when we look at Section 47, it goes through and it lists the general conduct obligations. And these obligations, they're quite diverse. They cover things like responsible lending, which we all know. We've all become adept and very confident in talking about responsible lending obligations. It also has other things, the other general conduct obligations. And as you go through them, there's compliance obligations. That's on here. Risk management. IT infrastructure and data security, credit supervision and training of representatives. The next one talks to resources. You must have adequate financial resources to manage the outcomes for your Australian credit licensee and manage the long-term expectations. You must have adequate human resources. And this is where it starts to become really, really interesting. So when we talk about adequate human resources, in the banking code, so I'm going to flip backwards and forwards between the direct obligations of the NCCP and then the voluntary obligations. If you've subscribed, you've voluntarily submitted to this standard and you must meet it. And I will not waver from that. If you've subscribed to the code of practice, you must meet those obligations. Otherwise, you've wasted everybody's time. So when we talk about the banking code of practice or the code of banking practice, whichever one they're referring to it as now, every time they rewrite this thing, they give it a new name. But it talks in the banking code, it talks to having adequately trained resources to deal with any particular campaign that you might run. So if you're going to run a campaign and you don't have enough staff to support the outcome for the consumer, then you're going to have a problem. It's a breach of the code. Further to that, in the code, it talks to dealing with customers in a fair, reasonable, ethical manner, or fair, reasonable, ethical, and consistent manner. Yeah. But the underpinning principles, if you read the banking code of practice, it has 4 underpinning principles, and they focus on delivering good customer. And we know this, deliver a good customer outcome. Well, that's not my customer, I don't care. Yeah. But it talks about delivering good customer and community outcomes. And as a broker group, we're a crucial part, an absolutely fundamental part of that banking community, of the general community itself. So when it talks about delivering good community outcomes and having adequately trained and an adequate number of staff to deal with the campaigns that you're running, you go out and you run a $4,000 cashback, expect people to apply for it. And if you're going to make them wait 45 days for that outcome, that is not a good customer outcome, it's not a good community outcome, and it's a piss poor outcome against the obligations under the Act and the commitments that have been made under the banking code. So as we go through it, all right, so again, it would be too simple if I stayed on one point. I'm going to bounce back a little bit now because I want to address this in a fashion that makes sense in my head, which will look a bit like this. But we now, before we really launch into that conversation about what are the obligations of the lender, I want to talk to the obligations of the broker. Yep, because we all know with the introduction of BID on the 1st of January 2021, the customer's outcome, this is the first time in history that the customer outcome has been legislated. Yeah, this is now part of the Act. It's actually written into the Act. So now when we consider the customer's outcome, and we look at the things that we used to look at in the assessment of responsible lending, loan must be not unsuitable. In order to be not unsuitable, you must conduct reasonable inquiries. Customer must be able to make the repayments to the incoming facility without experiencing substantial hardship, and loan must meet the customer's requirements and objectives. I nearly forgot the third one there. That would have been very interesting, very embarrassing to do live. It must meet the customer's requirements and objectives. Yeah. Now that assessment, if you do 1, 2, 3, do those 3 things, the loan's not unsuitable. Happy days, you've met responsible lending. But what best interest duty brings to the table, and I think these are good outcomes. It does create a lot more work, and depending upon the technology solution that your particular aggregator has provided you, some of them are more complex and take a little bit more time, but it is delivering good outcomes. Fincher is currently engaged with ASIC in some feedback just with regard to the delivery of BID and the measurement of that, and I'm really keen to share some of those results as they come through. But focusing on this one, under best interest duty, and we talk about the customers, the ranking priority of the customer. Yeah. So yes, the loan does these 3 things, and I've taken these 3 products. You told me you want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things. And you told me you were trying to achieve this. These 3, 4 products, they do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I've compared these, and all of them meet that not unsuitable. Yeah, they all meet that. But the next part to it is the customer's ranking priority. So for example, if the ranking priority is, look, man, I've signed this contract of sale, I've got to settle. I've got to settle on in 30 days. Yeah, because no one's ever had that. 30 days, I'm even being generous. I've got to settle in 2 weeks, man. Now, when you've got a lender that is advertising an SLA, of 7 days, and it's not 7 days, that's problematic in itself. But where you have a lender where you know that the expected outcome, I think that the best solution for you, based on what you've told me, you told me you want a cashback. Okay, well, there's 4 of those, and but it's going to be 45 days before they pick up the deal. Yeah. Now, under best interest duty, if you know there's a better option available, particularly for that particular product, and I know a number of brokers that have done it, mate. You're just going to have to go to the branch. I can't help you, because if I do it, you're going to miss your deadline, and that's a pretty shitty outcome. It's not pretty shitty. It's just really shitty.
Extremely shitty.
Yeah, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's just not fair. It's just not the gist of things, Your Honour. So when we look at it now and we say, as a broker, under the best, in order for me to meet my obligations under best interest duty, I'm going to recommend a loan for you that probably isn't as good as the one that you actually deserve. I want to send you over here, but you're going to miss. So there are fundamental parts to this. That is absolutely the most appropriate loan. That's the best one for you, based on everything you told me. That's the one I want to recommend. I want to recommend this guy, right? I'm not going to give you that guy.
Another product placement from you.
I'm not going to give you that guy because he's not going to pick up the ad. So we either go for something that is probably not quite as good, so you can meet your settlement criteria, or I'm going to send you to the branch. And at some point in time, we've got to say enough's enough. You have, as a lender, you have an obligation under the Act, and you have a voluntary subscription obligation under the banking code to ensure that you're delivering equal outcome and to ensure that you're meeting these obligations. So as we go through, when we talk about, then this is where it starts to get really, really, really murky waters legally. If by way of your conduct, you put me in breach of my obligations, my legal obligations, which is what best interest duty is. If by way of your conduct and your outcome, you put me in breach of my obligations, then we're going to have a problem. You can't contract me. You can't say, Julian, I want you to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things for me. And I'm going to pay you this amount of money, but I'm going to require you to rob a bank and run over pedestrians on the way. You can't contract me to break the law. But by way of your general engagement with me, if you force me to do that, you're starting to see the complexity here. So that's a problem. But outside of that, so we look now, Section 47 of the Act, the general conduct obligation says you must have an adequate number of staff and an adequately trained staff. It's actually written in there now into the Act. It's not just the banking code that says it. It's written into the Act, and it says you must have this. So what do? It's always been there. You've always been required since 2011, since the implementation. Geez, I'm getting animated. Since the implementation of the NCCP, this has been a general conduct obligation. And we have slowly but surely let it slide to a point in time where it's, I'm not going to say anti-competitive, but just by saying I'm not going to say it, you see what I'm thinking. We're not going to go down that path. What we're going to simply focus on is my obligation. You expect me to meet my aggregator and ASIC and everybody around me, the general community expects me to meet my obligations under best interest duty. We've gone from taking 45 minutes to an hour to process an application. Then we're doing all this living expenses stuff. And we're doing this and we're doing that. Now 4 or 5 hours in some cases to process an application. Right? I'm meeting my expectations. I'm meeting my obligations. Now I expect you to meet yours. Now, how do we do something about it? That's the question, right? Good job, Julian. You've pointed out the blatantly freaking obvious. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Herein lies the rub. It's my new favorite new saying. Herein lies the rub. Right. We've talked about the NCCP, and we talked mostly last year about the expansion of the product intervention powers with ASIC. Yeah, and one of those things, Dan, I'm going to hit you up here, man. I'm going to put you on the spot because I just love doing it. Because when you can't answer, I feel superior.
Okay, I'll use the I speak no English excuse if I can't answer, but keep going, proceed, and I'm also being mindful of the time as well.
Oh wow, I do waffle. So the 1st of October we saw, or in actual fact 1st and 5th of October, there was a couple of dates. We saw DDO, and we talked in depth about DDO, and obviously the fact that we're engaging in excluded conduct, which was great, good outcome for us. Thank you very much for everybody that participated in that and assisted us to get into that. That's both our industry associations. Another one was actually, we'll just skip straight to the one that I care about. It's breach reporting obligations. Now, as an Australian credit licensee, so if you hold your own credit license, or if you're a credit rep of an aggregator, as an Australian credit license, you have an obligation to report breaches against your own license. Yeah. So if something goes wrong, someone's engaged in some conduct they shouldn't have, you're obligated to report it to ASIC. Interestingly, and this is where it starts to get really, really definite as far as delivering outcomes is concerned, you must report breaches by other licensees. It has a whistleblower obligation to it. Now, when I say adequate number of staff, we need to now make a decision. What is a reasonable period of time? If I'm going to submit my application to a lending institution, what's a reasonable amount of time to wait? This will be decided by not by me, but by and not by people that sit in ivory towers. Absolutely not. This one gets decided by us. This one gets decided by the people that are impacted by it and the consumers that ultimately are getting let down. So if we look at it, a breach reporting protocol, we say 14 days. More than 14 days, that's bullshit. We've got to stop doing that. It's rubbish. It's rubbish. It's just rubbish. More than 14 days. I mean, I'm not here to dictate. I'm not here to make up the time frame, right? You tell me. Someone. Let's do a survey. Let's do a finance and coffee survey and find out what brokers believe to be a reasonable period of time to have a lending institution take to process before they even touch. It's going to take 10 days before we even pick it up. Really? Yeah. Aren't you supposed to have an adequate number of staff to deal with this? Or is it 14 days?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the first year, the blame was on COVID, and then they had overseas staff on this sort of that, and that's just ridiculous. But then the continuation of the cashback offers, while the SLAs dropped below 15 days, and then asking for the brokers to be compassionate to them was just
compassion is done. We're done with compassion, okay? Because we didn't. I'll tell you what compassion we got with best interest duty. We got 6 months. All right, there's your compassion. You've had your 6 months. We gave you 12. In actual fact, we've given you 18 to 24. Here it is. It's time to carry the weight of the obligations that you've made.
So then now, obviously, brokers can report that breach. I'm taking it.
It has to be the licensee, right? And again, I encourage you to engage in robust conversation with your aggregator as to what you believe it should be. Yeah. If you're having to wait 30 days to have an application picked up, I'm telling you right now, that is not an adequate number of staff. It's not. It's simply inadequate. It's simply not good enough to make someone wait 30 days before we're going to pick up your application. If you have to, if your product is so red hot that you're going to make people wait 30 days, I suggest you dial it back a bit or get some more staff. But we're not going to let you run it. We can't allow it to occur, because what it does, Deanne, what it does is it places brokers in danger of breaching their obligations. So now we've got two very serious points. We've got best interest duty, and we've got general conduct obligations. And if you're not meeting yours, I can't meet mine. But I'll give you a red hot tip. AFCA's not going to let me off the hook as a broker. They're not going to let me off the hook because my customer missed it because your queue was too long. So either get your shit together, either get it together or make it less enticing. I would not suggest that anybody is going to try to sell less. So if you want to continue to sell more, you must be prepared to deal with the consequences. When we talk about breach reporting, now this is dangerous ground. That's why I'm sitting in front of Premium Capital and not Finchel. No, this is dangerous ground, right? Because it's dangerous to antagonize the favor of the people to antagonize the people that you're trying to court their favor. So again, it doesn't make much sense. But I'm obligated now. I'm obligated to make these reports. So when we start to see, I saw an email earlier today from one of my brokers who's got an urgent deal, and he submitted it to a lender. They said, you weren't going to look at it until the 14th of February. I thought, well, hang on a second. You know it's urgent. And this is not a guy that does this all the time. Why does he have to wait until the 14th of February for someone to pick it up and say, hey, I need this? Just look at it now. Look at it now. We carry these obligations. Now, you've made community-based obligations that I think you should be held accountable to. So now we have the breach reporting obligations, right? I kid you not, I'm going to start filling them in. You might just wait, particularly where we've got known deliverables that blow out. Yeah. So again, this is something that I probably should have sought the consent of my employer before I said I was going to do that, but it's got to happen. It's got to happen. We are being held accountable to lenders. We're seeing brokers lose accreditations. We're seeing brokers being, dragged over the coals by AFCA for, the customer missed their settlement deadline as a result of $25,000 compensation. What? It was the.
Then you can bet that your PI insurance is going to go exponentially up after that as well. But we're at 22 minutes already. I am mindful of the time that we have left and so forth. Right? So
how long have we got left?
8 minutes.
Oh wow, geez. Okay, so let me just summarize that, because this is a really important point, Deanne, and I think there's you can tell by my animation, right? I'm as frustrated. I'm not even as frustrated as the brokers, because I don't have to deal with it, right? I'm a peripheral to this. The bottom line is the lenders have an obligation under their license to make sure that they have an adequate number of staff and that those staff are adequately trained. If they don't meet those obligations, we have an obligation as an industry to report it each time it occurs. So as a licensee, again, if you want some clarification on this, if you are a licensee, on sort of how that works and what that looks like, you don't want to go making ridiculous amounts of reports for no reason, yeah, and you don't want to be seen by ASIC to be just some whinger. But what we must do is we must hold people accountable to their commitments and their obligations.
Yeah. So I might just throw it in that if Macquarie can do it, so can you. Anyway, onto the.
I don't know what that. My apologies to my friends at Macquarie Bank. I don't know what he was talking about.
So the next item that grinds my gears, and it's I suppose, what do you call it? And this is you do work for an aggregator as well, so I guess it's one that is nice for me to ask you this, right? So it does occur often in the group, in a sense where changing aggregators appears to be damn hard, right? The separation letters, and I'll say that because it's sort of like, why does it take 30 days to get a separation letter? Right? Because you're effectively closing someone's business down for 30 days before they could actually move, right? So when someone moves to you, everything's ready to go, ready to rock. But when
I'm being stitched up here, man.
Well, I'm just asking, right? So
no, that's a bloody good question.
Well, okay, so and this is brought up only sense because over the Christmas break there is one major aggregator that's having issues with commission payments. That's an aside altogether. But then that's brought up the question from a few anonymous posts going, "I like to move. How do we do this? Or why is it this?" So just can you explain why the separation letters,
so
right?
a couple of things. There's in addition, so we used to rely primarily or solely on the separation letter for transition between aggregator, right? And that separation letter is provided to the lending panel for their assessment of the adequacy, for lack of a better word, for that broker to join, and obtain their accreditation. Now, contractually, and this is what we talk about here, contractually, the aggregator is not obligated to provide anything until that contract has actually run its course. So you provide your notice, and that's the 30 days. We do it. Yeah. Personally, do I support that as a concept? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. But
that's the meme I had. You're still,
but that's where I got it from. But so what we're talking about now is the contractual obligation of each party. Yeah, you terminate the contract. 30 days is when that is up, and that's when we'll give you the letter. Yeah. What I can tell you is an absolute certainty is that I have been contacted by friends and colleagues at other aggregators, very friendly ones to me, which are sort of Dan and Tanya. And look, we're more than happy to sort of on the occasion where it's called for. But as a general practice, when the contract is up, when the contract is finalised, that's when you'll get your separation letter. The next part to that is, and again, when you talk about grinding your gears, we'll talk about grinding my gears because Finshaw onboards sort of 50 to 60 new brokers a month. These are not new to industry. There's big brokers that are transitioning. So we're right at the forefront of some of those frustrations, right? And I've illustrated my frustrations, as you can probably imagine. I'm not real good at biting my tongue, which sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit. But what we have now is, while we relied solely or primarily on the separation letter to assess broker conduct, we saw it change sort of 4 or 5 years ago, which said, we used to have, and everybody that's been around for a while, you remember this, we used to have a letter that said under no adverse circumstances, or it said nothing. Now, under no adverse circumstances meant you'd done nothing wrong. And when it said nothing, basically it means, it's not no adverse, which means it's actually adverse. So, stay away from this guy. He's done something wrong. And you have to be able to demonstrate that. Now, when I came to Finshaw, I said, well, that's ambiguous at best, right? So we're going to do it this way. We're going to say it's either not adverse or it's adverse. You will stand the courage of your convictions. If you're going to end someone, you get an adverse letter, man, you're done. You're done. You're not going to get any accreditations. It's over. It means you've engaged in serious misconduct or something along those lines. You don't get adverse for nothing, right? But if you're going to stand the courage of convictions, you must. You owe it to the people you owe it to the people that you're representing, that you're keeping, to say, I am drawing a line in the sand and I'm not going to accept this. Now, again, that is in fear of litigation. Yeah. And again, I don't encourage anybody to put themselves in a position where they get sued, unless, of course, they're paying my bills. And at that point in time, we said, this is the direction that we're going. This is the brand that we want to support. What we saw sort of post that was the implementation of what is referred to, and I think it's rubbish, is a factual separation letter that says, well, it's not adverse, but this. Yeah, but. And I'm not a big fan of yeah, buts, not even from my 14-year-old, let alone in a professional environment. So it's clean, but. Well, it's either clean or it's not. So what we look at now is a couple of things, and this is pretty dear to my heart. Number one, it's an implied term to a contract, right? So there are express terms to a contract which are written in, but in order for a term to qualify as an implied term, it must meet a number of criteria. Number one, it must be so obvious it goes without saying, and a separation letter is so obvious it goes without saying, but it must be fair and equitable. And I don't understand how a process that punishes people only on exit can be equitable in any way, shape, or form. Now, again, we go back to that, and if it is an implied term, it benefits for the party for whom the contract was drafted, not the drafter, but the third party to that. So again, I don't see it to be massively equitable. Now, as an industry, again, we've allowed this to continue, and the industry associations said, well, look, we do need these details, but we don't need those details anymore because we have a very clear and specific reference checking protocol that says what are the compliance audit outcomes, what was their conduct, what was this. This is a very comprehensive form. Now, the only purpose that a separation letter serves nowadays is for the application of lender accreditation. Now, what really gets me on this one, man, is that's the concept of procedural fairness, which is it's a concept, it's a general common law concept, which says The process by which a decision is made must be fair and equitable and reasonable. It's got to be consistent. And what we're seeing right now is far from consistent, because I can tell you now, right now, I'll tell you sure as shit we don't do it. It's either adverse or not adverse. That's it. There's nothing in between. No buts. No buts. No buts. Yep. No soup for you. The next part to that is where you receive a...
I shouldn't. That's...
Where you receive a separation letter, right? Where you receive a separation letter that says, the broker was with us between these dates. He's under no adverse circumstances. During this period, the broker lost an accreditation with the National Australia Bank. Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay. Not every accreditation is lost for an adverse reason. Yeah, it might be, it could be any number of equitable reasons for the loss of an accreditation. But hang on a second.
Not sending any applications for a 6 month period, which was ridiculous.
It could be anything. Could be anything. We received 140 terminated accreditations in November from one of the larger lenders. I won't say who it is, and many of them carried no explanation at all. Not adverse. Just, hey, look, we're not dealing with this guy anymore. Now, the problem that I have, right, and when we talk about procedural fairness and we talk about equity to the network, aggregators are supported by brokers, not the other way around. And it's about time people started to realise that. So what we look at now, is where you say, okay, well, this is what happened. They were with us and it's not adverse, but this happened. When we look at procedural fairness as a general law concept, we say, well, unless you report that every time, unless you tell the lending panel and be sufficiently proximate, he lost his NAB accreditation in 2018. That's rubbish. I don't want to know. It's in the reference. It is exactly where it needs to be. We are fully informed on the decision that we're about to make with regard to this particular individual. What you're doing now is vindictive and vexatious. It's saying, hey, on your way, take that with you. Yep, take that with you. No. When we talk about procedural fairness as a concept, we say, well, hang on a second. If you haven't reported every single lost accreditation to your entire panel every time, does that qualify as an unfair process or an unfair practice? And it absolutely does. Absolutely it does. So what we've seen, even post-implementation of reference checking, a number of separation letters, and I just call them shitty separation letters, right? And you say, well, hang on a second. If you haven't reported every lost accreditation at the time, why are you telling them now? Because it's preventative in its nature, because the broker will fail to obtain a number of key accreditations that they require to demonstrate compliance with their best interest duties. You can lose one accreditation, you can lose two. But if all of a sudden you haven't got any of the, sort of the top 6 lenders in the country because they're saying, oh, well, you lost this one. If they don't want you, I don't want you. Because that is the reaction, by the way. We were courted very heavily by a very senior member of one of the larger banks. And I've got a shit ton of respect for this guy. And he sat down with myself and Simon Bednar, my boss, on a number of occasions and said, look, we want to know when someone else is being investigated by another lender or terminated. And we stood firm on that one, and we just said, look, we're not going to tell you. We can't do that. Number one, it's commercially in confidence, that information. But secondly, you're going to pull the pin on them. We know you are. And we're not prepared to do that to our entire network every time they've got a problem, particularly if we can't substantiate the quality of the information that's being provided to us from the other party. So we're not going to tell you. But what we'll do is we'll tell you when they leave. Is that... I can't be the only person that sees that as rubbish. It's just rubbish. We'll let you stay. We're happy. We're all friends. Oh, you want to leave? Oh, we're going to tell them. And they're not just telling us from a fully informed position. Yes, we must be fully informed. And no, we don't onboard everybody that comes to us. We make our own commercial decision around that. But if you didn't tell the lending panel at the time that they lost it, and you let them stay for a little while, or even if you terminate them as a result, it's not your position. You don't have an obligation. I'm sure as shit you don't have an obligation to then notify the entire lending panel when they're applying for accreditations. The role for that is in the reference. So I suppose what I'm saying is, if you've got one of these separation letters that says not adverse, but, ring me. Because I recently dealt with, and this is what sort of fueled the fire for me, right? I recently dealt with a broker in Tasmania. I won't tell you his name just yet, but this is the reason, Jen, that I reached out to you about Tasmania for sort of the end of March, was because this guy's been in the industry for a long time, and he's just such a genuinely, not like me, I can be assessed as abrasive sometimes. But this guy's a genuinely good bloke, right? He had one situation, which I entirely disagree with the entire set of circumstances. Oh, I did say a bad word there. the entire set of circumstances that related to this guy, sort of wanting to switch aggregators, and he got screwed. And I looked at that situation, and I did receive, and I will give a big heads up to Chelsea Deacon, who again just chimed in and helped us sort this matter out. But again, at some point in time, you just got to say, it is not our position as an outgoing aggregator to ruin your career. If you're going to make that decision, then make it adverse or don't make it at all. It's become far too easy. It's become far too easy for people in positions of moderate power to make decisions that have such significant impacts on the broker. Yeah. I mean, these things, not being able to obtain sort of big 5, big 6 accreditations, man, that is detrimental to you. It's detrimental. And you've got aggregators that are just saying, look, this letter, I'm not prepared to take that risk. I'm prepared to take that risk. I'll sign off on it all day for as long as the reference comes back and I can find out what it's about. But those types of letters, if you've got one, call me. Please call me. I'm not hard to find, by the way. 0400093497.
This is not an ad for. This is not an ad for.
I'm not. Listen, you don't have to come to Finshaw. No. I'm not suggesting that you should be coming to Finshaw in any way, shape, or form. But rubbish outcomes, and we've got to get rid of it.
And on that, we're almost out of time as well. So yeah, so thank you, mate, just for taking time today.
Thank you again.
No, we'll bring you back. Obviously, not just on the compliance issue, but just things that grind our gears. I'm going to put it up to the group as well. If anyone wants to join these little, what do you call it? I'm going to call it a show. What grinds our gears? Because look, we're coming into an election year. There's a lot of things that are upsetting a lot of people, right? And things just don't seem to be getting fixed, and it's just weird. But it is what it is. So let's have a chat about it in this little show that we'll do. But,
the first stage. This is what they say. Right? The first stage to recovery is acknowledgement.
It is, and I miss my McDonald's. Okay, I'm gonna go have my McDonald's lunch.
Hey, happy Lunar New Year to everybody. Chinese New Year. Take care. Year of the Tiger. Rah. I'm a 1974 baby, man. So I'm Year of the Tiger. I'm on. This is my year. Apparently, I'm going to be less confrontational. Thank you.
We'll see about that.
Appreciate you. I appreciate you as always, my brother.
Talk to you.
Ciao.
Okay, bye.